Right, well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to tonight's Development Control Committee meeting. Got a fair number of items to get through tonight. Hopefully it won't take too long. Just a few housekeeping and procedural things that will make a start on the business agenda for tonight. Fire evacuations. There are no fire alarms drills scheduled for this evening. Therefore, if the fire alarm sounds, please make your way out of the building as soon as you possibly can. Fire exit is behind you in the public gallery and behind us either side on the high table. We will go downstairs and the muster point is in the War Memorial Park. Just for everyone to note that this meeting is being webcast live on the internet. And just one final thing to request, those of you who've got mobile phones, if you could either switch them off or switch them to silent, that would be very much appreciated. The Development Control Committee is a quasi-judicial committee made up of councillors from all parties and none acting in an apolitical capacity. The decisions to be made here tonight will be based on planning law with reference to policies listed in the current Basingstoke and Deane Local Plan, the National Planning and Policy Framework, and individual neighbour plans at parish council level. Seated in the chamber in front of you to your left and to my right are the councillors who will be making those decisions tonight. To my left are planning officers who will be providing advice and expertise on each of the applications under consideration. And to my right is our legal officer who's there to make sure that all our decisions, if they're not popular, at least they're kept legal. For each item under consideration, we will start with a planning officer introducing the item. We'll then have representations from people registered to speak, so that will be parish councils, then objectors, then supporters, followed by any borough councillors wishing to speak. Each group of people in the aforementioned categories will have a maximum of 4 minutes between them. And committee members will be given opportunity to ask questions of them outside of that time. We'll then have questions for officers based largely on any matters arising or from updates received after publication of the papers. Councillors will also have had the opportunity to ask officers questions before the meeting, and some of the items of question will have had a site viewing last Friday, so if there are no questions to officers, that's the reason why. And finally, for each item, there will be a debate between committee members at the end of the item, followed by a vote and the decision being recorded. So, without any further ado, we'll start business proceedings tonight. Apologies for absence and substitutions. So, Councillor Tuck, you're standing in for Councillor Durrant. And Councillor Bowes, you're standing in for Councillor Bound. Any other apologies or substitutions? Okay, that's great. So next item of business, to appoint a vice chair. Do I have anyone proposing? Councillor Phillimore.
Can I propose Councillor Howard Sorrell, please?
Okay, do I have a seconder? Councillor Bowes. Any other nominations? Or we'll appoint Mike on... Councillor Freeman?
Am I allowed to nominate myself?
You can do, provided you have a seconder.
Would anyone want to second me? If not, I'll withdraw my nomination.
I can't.
I know you can't. That's fine. Not a problem. I'd just like to state for the record...
I'll second you, just so we can have a vote. Okay. I don't have any preferences. Okay, those in favour of Councillor Howard Sorrell, please show. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Those in favour of Councillor Freeman, please show. Councillor Howard Sorrell, you are now duly elected Vice Chair. If you would like to join us, I have got a job for you, and that is keeping time. So for the benefit of audience members and committee members who haven't been to DC before, we do have something that counts down your 4 minutes, and it's normally the vice chair that runs the gadget. It's a stopwatch with a few extra buttons on it. Okay, declarations of interest. Ooh, a few. Councillor Tuck.
Thank you, Chair. I normally sit on Old Basing and Litchpit Parish Council's Planning Subcommittee, so item 4, 4 Little Binfields, Chinham. However, at the time that was at the committee, I was on compassionate leave, so I was absent and have the minutes. The first sight I've had of this application is this morning.
Okay, duly noted. So you're in a position to continue. Okay. Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Chair. Very similar situation. I'm the chair of the Chinham Parish Council Planning Committee. This also appeared before the Planning Commission, but I was overseas at the time. I did not attend the meeting at all, and I've been not involved in any of the consultations.
Okay, duly noted. So you're happy to continue. Councillor Hussey. Okay, so you'll recuse yourself for that item. Okay, duly noted. Excellent, which brings us on to agenda item 4, urgent matters. There are none. Okay, item 5, minutes of the meeting held 15th of May. For accuracy, I see 1 or 2 nodding heads there. Do I have a mover? Councillor Court. Seconder, Councillor Bowes. Yeah, all those in favour show. That's carried. I shall sign those off as a duly accurate record in due course. Which brings us on to main business for tonight, which is applications for planning, and we will start off with item number 1, which is land at Upper Woodcote. Now, this previously came before committee, and we had a site viewing on Friday. So basically, where we're at with this is, having deliberated on it previously and having had representations, and we're now at the stage where I'll throw it open for questions to officers. Does anyone have any questions for officers? Oh yeah, we'll have an officer introduction. Okay, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a full planning application for the erection of a new farmhouse, garage and farm building, together with the existing access for residential purposes and associated landscaping. There's no updates, but this was deferred from the last committee for a site viewing. The application is recommended for refusal for 2 reasons. So firstly, the dwelling would be located within the countryside, outside any settlement policy boundary, and distance from facilities and services, which is not considered to represent a sustainable form of development, and the design is not considered to be of exceptional quality to fulfil the requirements of paragraph 84 to depart from the local plan. Secondly, it's considered that the development would result in harm to the North Wessex Downs national landscape and would not be sympathetic to or enhance the character and visual amenities of the area. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So any questions arising for officers from committee members? I see no hands raised. Okay, we'll move forward to debate then. Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Chair. I was the one that proposed the site viewing at the last DC committee, and I think those of us that did attend it actually appreciated the walk on the weather, but also to get a good idea of how this proposal sits within the landscape. From the photographs that are being flashed up on the viewer at the moment, you've got absolutely no idea of how this sits in the landscape, especially when we walked up to the ridge overlooking the site, and it is obvious that this farmhouse would sit in a bowl of the landscape. It would not protrude any higher than the original lodge that was on the site. that had, you can see it there, the chimneys that remained. It goes no higher than that. Now, the argument in the report says that this would have an adverse effect within the AONB. The adverse effect is really only for the public right-of-way that goes along the edge of the ancient woodland. So I don't think in the North Wessex Downs as a whole it is prominent. I challenge the use of the word prominent in one of the refusal paragraphs. That's start of paragraph 2. Because it isn't prominent. There's no way you could describe it as prominent. It's prominent if you would walk up to it, but in the landscape, it's not prominent. The other thing that was valuable on the site visit was the assurance from the applicant, because again, you can't tell from the photographs, there was a completed ring of ancient woodland around the site. At the moment, there's a big gap to the north. Well, that gap is going to be replaced with species of trees that reflect the ancient woodland that surrounds it. So there's no loss. There's actually a gain in the wooded area, a net gain, because the site is just on this rather scrubby field, which is prone to flooding, but they can take care of that through the production of a pond to the south of the structure. So the value I found of the viewing panel was absolutely essential. And in my mind, I've got no difficulty. So I certainly can't support the officer's recommendation. I will leave it there because if any of the other committee who viewed that site on the day, I'd like to hear their views as well. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. Do we have anyone else who would really like to have someone move something either way at this point? Councillor Phillimore?
Well, I also attended the site viewing and I concur with more or less everything that Councillor Miller said, and I'll propose approval.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just advise the committee, because the points raised so far about the prominence and viewing, that's reason for refusal number 2. That is something before the committee, obviously, that you'll take a view on. The reference to prominence is it specifically in relation to the fact that it is available and viewable from a public right-of-way, which is very close to the site. So that's what is meant by prominence, accepting the point that you'll take your own view as to how prominent it is within the wider landscape. But there's still reason for refusal number 1. That is essentially setting out that there is no policy basis to support this application. It doesn't fit under any of the policy SS6 in terms of the principle of development. It's a new dwelling in the countryside, and the analysis that's set out in the assessment of the report sets out why it doesn't fulfil any of the policy SS6 requirements. So there is no policy support for it in the first place. The only other alternative would be if there was a paragraph 84 truly exceptional design approach, which again is not considered the approach that's set on the assessment. So on both points of principle, the application fails. So if members were minded to be seeking to move approval, it would need to overcome that principal reason for which there is no material justification as set out in the report.
Councillor Gaskell?
Thank you, Chair. Just for clarification, the existing site, there was a dwelling there. So when you say it's a new dwelling in the countryside, is that still the case?
Yes, so the dwelling that was there does have a certificate of lawful use as a plot, as a dwelling. This site is, the actual building would be entirely outside of that original curtilage. So that's why it's not being considered as a replacement and therefore fails policy SS6 in that regard.
Councillor Bowes or Councillor Freeman?
Thank you. I personally totally agree with the officer's refusal. I'm extremely disappointed to see that there are no plans in there for things like solar panels, and I happen to agree it's stuck out in the middle of nowhere. I do think it will have an impact on the views, and I don't think that there is significant reasons for approval. I happen to agree totally with what the officers are suggesting.
Okay, councillor Phillimore, are you still moving approval? Okay. Councillor Freeman, are you moving the recommendation?
I'll move the officer's recommendation for refusal.
Okay, duly noted. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Bowes?
Yeah, I'd like to second that motion as well. It's also extremely isolated. I think the nearest property is at 700 metres away from the proposed site, and I can't think of anything much more isolated.
Okay, yep, duly noted. Okay, we've got a live proposal on the table. Those in favour of the recommendation, please show. Okay. Those against? 2. Any abstentions? None. Okay, can we have the decision, please?
Thank you, and that application is refused as per the agenda. Thank you.
Okay, which brings us on to application number 2, Bramley Cottage, St Marybourne. If we could have the officer introduced, please.
Thank you, Chair. This is an application for 2-storey side and rear extensions and a single-storey rear extension, replacement porch and a detached double garage. I bring your attention to the update paper, and 2 further letters of objection have been received, reiterating some of the previous concerns but also some additional ones. And also an officer comment in respect of those additional comments that have been raised. The officer's recommendation is for approval.
Okay, thank you very much. Do I have Mr. and Mrs. Liversedge registered to speak? If you'd like to come forward. So there's some desks at the top on the right we've set up to speak from. Press the button on the right to speak. When you're ready, you'll have 4 minutes. Button on the right, yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you for letting me come and speak today on behalf of those who have objected to this and previous proposals regarding the development of Bramley Cottage. We would like to highlight the following points: overcrowding of the site, unsympathetic design that is not subservient to the heritage host dwelling, avoidable harm to the heritage host dwelling, avoidable harm to adjacent listed asset, avoidable harm to the setting of the North Wessex Downs AONB and St Marybourne and Stoke Conservation Area, avoidable potential harm to biodiversity and light pollution, lack of detail for waterways, the fact that it's been recommended for refusal by the Historic Environment team, the fact that demolition or approval of these plans are not the only 2 options. You could adjust the plans for a 3rd option, and the importance of the creation of a lovely modern home that at the same time respects its surroundings. In the proposed plans, the original 3-bed farm workers cottage will be tripled, with the front elevation extended by 50% to the side, and 3 non-subservient rear extensions of awkward zigzag roof design with very tall external brick chimney that looms over the setting of the listed neighbour, plus a detached double garage. This swamps the host dwelling and completely changes the character of a simple farm workers cottage. As mentioned in the planning officer's report, extant planning permission exists for a new, small vernacular 4-bed cottage, which also went to committee. This new build cottage was approved by Historic Environment based on appropriate scale and design and distance from the surrounding assets. The current proposal is a 3rd bigger than those approved plans and has been rejected twice by the Historic Environment team. The cottage, previously approved for demolition, is now being treated, rightly so, as a non-designated heritage asset. The planning officer admits that these plans will cause harm to the cottage and its surroundings. The report offers 2 options: demolition of the heritage asset or saving of the cottage by building this proposal, despite the harm that it will cause. The response from the villagers is that there is a 3rd option. This harm is completely avoidable simply by readjusting the plans more sympathetically, taking advice from the conservation officer. Fundamentally, this design is not in keeping with the character and appearance of the area, nor the landscape of the AONB, so is contrary to policies EM1 and EM10 of the Basingstoke and Deane Local Plan, does not comply with the National Planning Policy Framework, and is also contrary to P5 and P7 of the St Marybourne Neighbourhood Plan. The planning officer also argues that the historical significance of the conservation area and the neighbouring listed assets will be maintained if the cottage is not demolished, so balancing out any harm that might be caused. However, the Historic Environment Report suggests that these bulky designs will not only negatively impact the historical significance of the cottage, but also the significance of the adjacent listed house and impact the character and appearance of the conservation area. Therefore, the proposal, despite saving the cottage, still conflicts with policy EM11 of Basingstoke and Deane Local Plan to preserve or enhance the quality of the borough's heritage assets. Once more, it is avoidable harm if the plans are adjusted accordingly. If the plans are revisited, more care can be taken to consider potential light pollution from the skylights and clearer strategies for run water potentially contaminating the protected chalk stream. To conclude, we would like to ask the committee to defer or refuse this proposal to give time to the applicants to rejig the plans, taking into account the Historic Environment Report and the points made here. We would like to stress that the village will be very happy to see the cottage restored sympathetically in this beautiful protected setting with all the amenities for modern living through a harmonious design that also safeguards the past. Thank you.
Okay, that's right on time, actually. Councillors, do you have any questions for Mrs. Liversidge at all? Okay, you get away lightly. Thank you for your contribution. And in support, we have Jonathan Jarman. Welcome to Development Control. When you're seated and press the right-hand button, you'll have 4 minutes.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak in support of the application. As set out by the officer in their report, the principle of extending the property is acceptable. Indeed, the benefit of the proposal is that it will retain the existing house, which already has permission to be demolished. That permission remains extant until September 2025, so remains a relevant fallback position. However, proceeding with this existing planning proposal is not the preference of my client, who would rather retain the existing house to make it work for their needs. There are, of course, benefits to this approach. For instance, this is more sustainable because it negates the need to offset the embedded carbon from demolishing the building, whilst also adding better thermal efficiency in the new additions and renovations. It also means the existing building, which has been deemed a non-designated heritage asset by the Conservation Officer, would not be lost. Whilst we do politely disagree with their assessment that it should be afforded this designation, indeed, it represents an inconsistent position, noting that the Council, in determining the extent permission to demolish the house in its entirety, made clear as a matter of public record that the cottage has been unsympathetically altered, and the replacement roof, UPVC windows, the cement render have all significantly diminished the ability to appreciate any historic character which this building may have once possessed. In its current form, this structure does not make a positive contribution. In essence, it was not considered worthy of retention, and for it to now be considered a non-designated heritage asset basically flies in the face of the Council's position from less than 2 years ago. Nevertheless, under the proposal before you, the existing cottage will be retained, and their client should be applauded for seeking to do so. In relation to the setting of neighbouring Gambridge House, the retention of the cottage will also be of no harm. As pointed out, again, by the officer's report, the main extension will be approximately the same depth as that has already been approved for the replacement dwelling, and it's correct to conclude that the ability to demolish the cottage is a material planning consideration that would represent a worse position. In relation to neighbouring amenity, this has also been thoroughly assessed by the case officer, who in their report has confirmed that there would be no impact. In relation to the comments just made by the previous speaker, the third option, there is no third option. The fallback position would be to demolish the building. This is a sympathetically designed dwelling on a building which could be demolished. I cannot reiterate that enough. Thank you very much.
Excellent, thank you very much. Councillors, any questions for Mr. Jarman? Could you switch the mic off? Thank you very much for your contribution. Okay, we don't have any ward councillors down to speak, so next stage is questions for officers. Do we have any questions for officers? Councillor Court.
Could you, in the report, it mentions bats in terms of clauses included in a potential agreement. Are there actually bats on the site?
Yes, there are bats on the site. If I can draw your attention to page 96, para 8.47 through to 8.53, and that deals with the issue of bats, and there will be conditions to ensure that bat roosts and things are provided as part of the development.
Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Chair. On that particular point, bearing in mind what the agent has reinforced, I think about 3 or 4 times, that the default is to demolish the building entirely, would that change the bat situation?
There's no demolition as part of this proposal. It's just the works to the existing house. When they do the extensions, there's bats, I think, in the roof. They already have an extant consent to demolish, and that would have considered at that point, as part of that application, the presence of bats.
Any more questions, councillors? Councillor Miller again.
A follow-up on that, I'd like that recorded, please, because it seems to be a little bit of a contradiction here. It does go into detail about where the bats are in the report, but I just tried to make a link to what was said by the agent before the committee, that the default is demolishing the house.
If I can just say, paragraph 8.49, the survey confirms the presence of both common pipistrelle and brown long-eared bat roosts within the house and other bats foraging / commuting over the site.
I've got a question, actually. I don't normally ask questions myself. Mentions made in the update of objections regarding dark skies. Is there a policy that's covering that?
There's not a local plan policy covering that, no.
Okay. There being no further questions from councillors, I shall throw the item open for debate. Anybody wish to open proceedings on the debate? Can we all start focusing on debate, please? Anyone want to go first? Do I have a mover? Councillor Tuck?
Yes, Chair. I mean, I completely agree with the first speaker in that the proposed development is not subservient to the existing, but I feel I'm sort of bowled flat by the fact that there is a demolition order on some of it, or a plan has been approved for demolishing the site. So I find I'm kind of completely compromised, because it would have been nice. I think this cottage as it stands has charm and is capable of great charm, and it's a bit frustrating that the proposal, which is great that they're keeping it, but the balance, but I feel the boat has sailed on that one, so I'm challenged.
Okay, do we have anybody prepared to move approval or refusal? Councillor Housewell? Okay, thank you. Okay, do we have a seconder? Councillor Gaskell, well done. Okay, live proposal on the table. Those in favour of the recommendation, please show. Eight. Okay. Those against, please show. One. Any abstentions? Two. Okay, can we have the decision, please?
Thank you, Chair, that the application be approved subject to the conditions in the officer's report.
Okay, which moves us on to the third planning item under consideration tonight. 2 Folly Cottages, Ash Lane, Ash Warren. If we could have the officer introduction, please.
Thank you, Chair. This is a full planning application for the erection of a lifetime home. In terms of an update, it's noted that paragraph 8.37 on page 122 of the agenda relates to a site in Kingsclere named Crookfir Cottages. This site is not near the application and was put in error. The application is recommended for refusal for 3 reasons. Firstly, whilst the site's considered previously developed land, it's located within an isolated location and therefore falls contrary to the criteria set out within policy SS6A. Secondly, it would not...
Okay, we'll note that. Sorry.
Okay. Secondly, it would not promote sustainable transport contrary to policy CN9. And thirdly, it's considered it would not successfully integrate or be sympathetic to or enhance the character and visual amenity of the area. Thank you.
Councillor Phillimore, I'm advised if you declared an interest and recuse yourself from a meeting, then that means you need to leave the room. Sorry? If you're declared an interest and you're recusing yourself, you need to leave the room. Are you speaking? Are you speaking as a walkout? Okay. Beg your pardon. Okay. All right. Okay. Right. Okay. Okay. So we don't have any parish council representatives. In support, we have Caroline Downey and Ian Crossley. Welcome to Development Control. Okay, and when you're seated, there's 2 mics there you can each use. You'll have 4 minutes between you. Press the right-hand button to speak. Thank you very much.
Thank you. My name is Ian Crossley and I am the applicant. As a brief background, I've been a resident of Basingstoke for over 30 years and 22 years at the residence at Folly Cottages. My wife and I have worked in Basingstoke most of our lives, running one of the top 3 sustainable printing companies in the UK. My wife is also a qualified and practicing ecologist. I now work locally promoting wildflower development and green infrastructure, and we are both lovers of the countryside. With regards to the application, it's been recommended for refusal on 3 points. The first, the location is isolated. As the planning report states, the definition of isolation that needs to be considered is that it's far away from other places, buildings and people, remote. In terms of isolation, the proposed property, as you'll know from your visit, will be 60 metres away from 2 existing dwellings at Folly Cottages and is located in the hamlet of Ash Warren with 13 additional dwellings, as well as being less than 1.25 miles to Overton with a population of over 4,500. The location is less than 3.5 minutes drive from a mainline station running to London Waterloo. It is 4 minutes drive from a doctor's, dentist, school and the full range of shops and services offered by Overton. In terms of cycling, the location is 9 minutes from the mainline station and 12 minutes to the high street. The location is rural, but it is certainly not, in my opinion, remote or far away from buildings, places and people as the definition requires, and has access to a full range of services within minutes. The second point focuses on sustainable transport issues. As stated, the mainline station is 9 minutes away by bicycle. The nearest bus stop is less than 4 minutes by bicycle. The Department of Transport Cycling and Walking Strategy of 2017 seeks to actively encourage cycle journeys where a journey would be under 15 minutes. The same report acknowledges safety as being the primary barrier to uptake. The road between the proposed location and Overton is both safe and accessible and a highly desirable destination for cyclists and walkers in the area. Where car journeys are necessary, we presently use an electric car with a charging point at 2 Folly Cottages, which you may have noticed at your visit. We will be installing the same at the proposed dwelling. With regards to the third point relating to the design, we have made a conscious effort to make the proposed new dwelling in keeping with the natural environment, using sustainable materials and designs that respect the landscape it is located in. The new dwelling is modest and has a smaller footprint than the existing buildings on site and is well screened on all sides. Outside of the planning report, I have not been made aware of any objections from local residents, the local council or any bodies representing the area's scenic or A and B status that will support the idea that the proposed dwelling is an incongruous form of development. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Crossley. Sorry. I think the applicant's really kind of summarised everything that I would have normally have said, but just to summarise again, there are no objections from any consultees. There are no objections from any of the general public. In fact, I believe the public are fairly in support of the scheme. And in our opinion, this application does comply with SS6A. It is on previously developed land. It is not isolated. It does not constitute land of high environmental value, and the scale of the development is appropriate to the site. We therefore respectfully ask that the application be approved here tonight by this committee on the grounds that it does comply with local plan policy SS6A. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thank you both for your contribution. Councillors, do we have any questions for Ms Downey or Mr Crossley? Councillor Courts.
Good evening. Can you tell us what you intend to use the dwelling for, please?
The dwelling is a home. So we live at number 2 Folly Cottages. We will be living there.
Thank you for that.
Okay, any more questions? I don't see any hands raised. Okay, thank you very much for your contribution. So we have no objectors, no parish representatives, but we do have Councillor Phillimore. If you'd like to approach, I expect you know the drill by now.
Good evening, Chair. I might be repeating some of what's already been said, so that's not with. This application relies on the definition of isolation. I believe that this application is not isolated and therefore complies with local plan policy SS6A. There have been no objections from Parish Council, neighbours or statutory consultees. The proposed dwelling, as can be verified by those who attended the site visit, sits in a discrete position, not visible from surrounding ash warren and in a natural wooded position. Only hazel bushes would be coppiced. As attested in the report, the scheme complies with the following. It would be of high quality design using high quality materials. The proposal would integrate with the existing residential garden, not be overly prominent within the national landscape with a rural setting. Furthermore, the report goes on to state that there will be no impact on trees, amenity, transport including parking or trip generation or access. It complies with biodiversity and is therefore acceptable on these grounds and is able to demonstrate nitrate neutrality. The appeal decisions mentioned in the report are long since superseded by other decisions that have been granted planning permission. In particular is the concern of a necessary, consistent approach. An application was granted by this committee last year to a similar scheme at Safeview Cottages in Freefolk that was further away in distance than this application, but deemed not to be isolated.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Phillimore. Councillors, do we have any questions for Councillor Phillimore? Okay, thank you very much indeed. I've been advised that we might need an explanation on policy SS1.A. Oh, thank you, Colin. Sorry.
Can I isolate myself?
Okay. Yes.
Okay, so policy SS6 is for new housing in the countryside, and criterion A is where it's on previously developed land. Developed land is determined, is considered in the MPPF, and the definition of that includes gardens outside of built-up areas. So this is considered previously developed land. Of that, but to also fully meet SS6A, it has to be that the site is not an isolated form of development, and the site is not of high environmental value, and the proposed use and scale of the development is appropriate to the site's context.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. So we have no more people down to speak, so I shall throw it open for questions to officers. Any questions for officers? Okay, debate. Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Chair. Once again, it's the value of site visits really brings it home to this committee. And when we visited the site, it's a, I'll make the comment, beautiful garden that this particular application refers to. But I think the presentation that we heard earlier on about the distances and accesses to various facilities, if you stand at the site and look around, you wouldn't know that you are that close to facilities. And quite frankly, it takes me longer than 9 minutes to get to the railway station, and I live in Basingstoke. So, you know, there's an anomaly here about the distances where people have to travel to get to various facilities. And I cannot get my head around this isolation sometimes. If we stick to the rules all the time, we're never going to build houses where they should be built. There's no reason why this structure cannot be built in this location. This is what I call sustainable. It would encourage people to walk. This is what we're trying to do in our societies today. And I've got no problem with well, I will see what other people say. I hope somebody else has got some words to say, but I'm going to be minded to move an approval on this one.
Okay, are you reserving the right to move an approval? Or
yes, I am.
Okay. Any other councillors wish to speak at this point? Councillor Freeman?
This time I'm actually in agreement with Councillor Miller. I don't think it's isolated, and I do think that it's sustainable. So if Councillor Miller is happy to move, I'm happy to second.
Okay, well, if someone moves, we'll need some reasons for approval. Do we have any other councillors wishing to contribute to the debate? Let's see some. Okay. Councillor Miller, are you minded to approve?
Yes, I'll move to approve. And if we take the refusal points one at a time, I got the feeling from what I heard from the definition of SS6A, this actually meets it. Or did I mishear?
It's considered previously developed land. Obviously, we're in disagreements from the next parts, but yes, it's considered previously developed land by being a residential garden outside a built-up area.
Because in paragraph 1, it sets out the exception, specifically SS6A, and it fails to meet the criteria.
Yes, so it's in two parts. You've got criteria A, which is provided that, so it's on previously developed land, provided that they do not result in an isolated form of development. That's criteria AI.
then
And then it's
my whole
and.
point, Chair, is that it does not, it actually satisfies it because of the distances we've heard referred to. And I think that was, well, certainly mine and the seconder's viewpoint that it's not isolated. So that would be my argument for that one. Sustainable transport, well, I think it does promote opportunities for sustainable transport. You're encouraging people in that location to cycle, and that's what we're about. And nothing further, I'm looking at item 3. I think it does correspond to the rural character. It fits in. And I think that's the whole point of what we saw on the viewing panel, that it would fit into the rural character. It's not going to destroy the rural character. It's screened every which way. So that's the way I'm going, Chair, on my reasons for approval. Mike, no doubt, will offer some advice about the wording.
Thank you. Yeah, just to reiterate the advice already given, you do need to look at policy SS6A and all the sub-criteria to it. So it's on previously developed land, yes, that's in the report and that's agreed. The parts where the report differs, I suppose, in terms of compared to the motion, is that we consider it is an isolated form of development. I appreciate you'll take your view on that, and that's set out particularly in detail from paragraph 815, 816 in terms of the two parts of it, both the distance to other built form and then the services and facilities as part of 816. I think the key point that we were trying to set out in the report is that we absolutely acknowledge it's next door to the two dwellings, but in terms of assessing that overall isolation and the judgment being created there, it's not just is it alone with no context of other buildings, it's do those buildings in themselves create an isolated form of development as a whole. So if there's now 3 buildings there, does that improve or otherwise the sense of isolation? In our view, in our assessment, the officer assessment has been done, the existing site is isolated and that one additional dwelling will not create a sort of cluster or density of dwellings that would change that point. Committee will come to their own view on that. On the specific wording in terms of the motion and the reasons for approval, obviously the first one is that you consider it not to be isolated. That's a planning judgment that you'll express. It's just on the second one, I don't think in reality we could say anything for a new dwelling in the countryside promotes sustainable transport. I think the reason for approval might be saying that it doesn't have a negative effect, but I think in terms of promoting, that's quite a hard place to get to from a situation where, realistically, there will be quite a reliance on private car to get to most places. I appreciate there's some opportunities for cycling, as you heard from the speaker, but in terms of promoting, I think that's probably a positive step that would possibly not be quite accurate in terms of the reason for approval.
Point taken. And if we put the right wording in there, I go along with what you say there. So those are the 2 reasons for approval, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Miller. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Freeman. Okay, right. So we have a live proposal on the table, moved and seconded. Those in favour, please show. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's carried. Okay. Those against and abstentions 1. Can we go through the conditions?
Okay, so we have prepared a list of conditions. So that would be adherence to the plans, to be commenced within 3 years, to ensure a schedule of materials and finishes, to provide a landscaping scheme, to ensure no, landscaping. So for hours of materials to be restricted, hours of operation for construction vehicles to be restricted, the parking and pedestrian areas on the approved plan to be laid out with a drained surface, the access to be brought out to be constructed prior to use, the cycling facilities to be secured on site, protective measures for trees to be adhered to, also refuse and recycling storage to be have an appropriate collection point, water efficiency standards to be met, contents of the ecology report to be adhered to, no external lighting. Then we've got, and then we've got the nitrates conditions, which relates to the package treatment plant to be installed in accordance with the approved details. The removal of PD rights for any package treatment plants, and the same for any connection to foul for mains drainage. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillors, are you agreed on the conditions? Okay.
Yes, Chair.
Yes, I think we are. Okay, right. Okay, so if we could have the decision then, please.
Okay, so that application is approved as it's considered that the development would comply with policy SS6. It would not have a negative impact on transport, and that it would not have a negative impact on the landscape or character of the area.
Excellent, thank you very much. Which moves us on to planning item number 4, which is 4 Little Binfields, Chinham. If we could have the officer introduction, please.
Thank you, Chair. This is a retrospective application for the change of use of the land to the east of 4 Little Binfields to residential use and the retention of a 1.94 metre high fence located south of the public footpath. There is no update, and the officer's recommendation is for refuse and enforced because of the retrospective nature of the application.
Okay, thank you very much. And we did have Steve Elliott down to speak, but I understand he's in Scotland. Yeah, okay. Right, so there are no speakers, in which case I shall throw it open to questions for officers. Councillor Miller?
Thank you, Chair. It's just a question, clarification really, on page 157. I'm afraid the key didn't mean anything. Could it be explained by officers, please? Because you've got a key there that appears, maybe it's in the reproduction from a slide or something else onto paper. But you've got 2 different things there that are exactly the same.
Yeah, you've got 2 areas of hatching. So it's basically the area immediately around the house is its existing curtilage. And then the other hatched areas around is land, I think. So it's colour coded up there. So you've got the purple area, which is the curtilage around the house.
Look at the drawings.
And then
It's
the
not the
bottom
same.
part is the boundary of the additional land.
No, look at the
outlined
drawings
in red.
on the page. Thank you, Chair. But on 157, that picture refers to the lower drawing. What about the upper drawing on page 157, which has got different boundaries marked on it? That's where my confusion was. That one. So the colours make all the difference, the reds and the blues.
So the hatch area is the land that's the change of use and where the fence is going. The blue is other land that the applicant owns, and the solid red line is the existing property and its curtilage.
Thank you very much. I just wanted everybody to be crystal clear about that.
Any further questions for officers? Okay, I'll throw it open for debate. Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not going to get into the issue about where the boundaries between parishes are on this one, because it's actually the road. It's so close, and it's quite appropriate that it was heard by 2 parishes. We've had occasions within Chinham, and I'm quite sure other areas of Basingstoke have had the same, of what we term land grabs by residents. We've got no problem with the residents making the proper applications to the council for either purchasing or getting some form of approval to extend their property boundary. But this is probably the worst I've seen in the nearly 17 years I've been a parish councillor. There have been some that have been very small, ingression into public open space, but this really I think is one of the worst. I really do. It's so simple to ask. Some people turn around and say, well, we'll do it and then we'll ask forgiveness. Not in this case. And I couldn't agree more with the recommendations by the officers.
Okay, so you're happy to move the
I'm happy
recommendation?
to move the officers' recommendation on this.
And you're happy for the policy considerations contained therein? Okay.
To refuse and enforce.
Yeah.
Just so the committee is clear, the land grab issue, the motive or how big it is all irrelevant. You should determine this just on the planning issues.
I just want to, thank you very much, Anne. Yes, I appreciate that 100%. I'm just saying, I've never seen anything like this. It's just a part of my commentary, but it's not relevant to any kind of decision or recommendation that I make here. I make that very clear.
Okay, so it's not material. I've got Councillor Court and Councillor Freeman. Councillor Court.
Thank you, Chair. Just support the recommendation given by Councillor Miller.
Okay, Councillor Freeman.
The same, and happy to second.
Okay, so we've got a proposal moved and seconded. Those in favour, please show. Okay, I think that's unanimous. So if we could have the decision, please.
Thank you, Chair, that the application is refused and enforcement action is taken.
Okay, so next up, planning item number 5, land south of Colehemley Farmhouse. If we could have officer introduction, please.
Thank you, Chair. This is a full planning application for the conversion of a disused barn to a one-bedroom holiday let with the creation of associated access, parking and amenity space. In terms of an update, it was just to clarify that the comments provided by Building Control were verbally given to the case officer. The application is recommended for refusal for 2 reasons. First, it is considered that the proposed building would be contrary to policy EP5A in that it would result in the substantial rebuilding and alteration of a building in order to make it fit for habitation. Secondly, it's considered it would introduce incongruous suburban built form into an elevated position which would cause irreversible harm to the intrinsic rural character and appearance of the North Wessex Down national landscape. It would impact the dark skies and would not be sympathetic or enhance the character of the area. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. So we have one speaker down in support. Andrew Clemps, if you'd like to approach. Welcome to Development Control. When you're ready, press the button right. You'll have 4 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Andy Clems. I'm the architect for the application. Councillors, this application for the conversion of a small redundant barn, could I ask for the image of the barn to go up on the slide, please? We see the reuse of redundant or disused permanent built, sorry, forgive me. The application was submitted under policy SS6C, whereby the development would reuse a redundant or disused permanent building, and policy EP5 for tourism development in the countryside, where it utilises an existing suitable building for conversion. I do have some concerns with the officer's report before you this evening. As inferred earlier, the report doesn't discuss SS6C at all. It's choosing instead to discuss only policy EP5. Whilst this is the policy relevant to tourism, I suggest that it's not the only relevant policy. Councillors, this building is an existing barn, which is proposed to be refurbished as a holiday let. In the context of the wider landscape, it will be largely unchanged. The officer's report at para 834 says the existing structure is a typical agricultural barn in terms of its appearance and materials, and as such is considered appropriate to its setting. I would agree. However, the reasons given refusal refer to incongruous suburban built form in an elevated position, irreversible harm to an eccentric rural character of the area B, and it cannot be successfully integrated with the landscape. I'm sorry, councillors, but these statements is nonsense. The building exists in the landscape. It's not incongruous, it's not suburban in form, and its location in the wider landscape is existing and will be largely unchanged. The site isn't even elevated. It's on the side of a wooded valley, well screened by mature woodland and hardly visible from any public viewpoint. The officer's recommendation under policy EP5A appears to be predicated on interpretation of the advice from building control that the barn would need significant upgrade to meet building regulation requirements for a new dwelling. Well, it does, but that doesn't mean substantial rebuilding. Comment from building control is typically referring to the upgrade needed for thermal insulation, not rebuilding, which is something that all barn conversions have to do. Indeed, policies EP5 and SS6C follow the GPDO Part Q guidance on this, where re-roofing and the increase in wall thickness is allowed to comply with the thermal requirements of the building regulations. If the slide for the section could be put up, please. If members refer to the drawing 105A, which is a section, you see the building is not substantially rebuilt as the existing timber-clad structural framing is used to form the new thermal envelope. Thank you. The key criteria is whether the existing barn structure is capable of conversion without substantial alteration. And I'm submitting to councillors this evening that's exactly what you see before you. And I would point out the other comment from building control, which is that the structure appears to be in relatively good condition, which it is. The officer's report also addresses the A and B landscape context of the application regarding concern regarding dark skies as a result of light skill. Well, as was mentioned earlier, there is actually no local plan policy regarding dark skies. However, if councillors are minded to approve the application, the applicant will be more than happy to introduce, with a condition, that suitable shutters or other protection was provided at dusk. And there are no roof lights proposed in the application. So in conclusion, in support of the application, Cole Henley Farm is located adjacent to the Countryside Public Right-of-Way 3B. It's well located for walkers, cyclists and visitors, such as visitors towards Shipdown, the Wiltshire Silt Mill, the distillery, etc. And the application supports the tourism aims and objectives set out in the Whitchurch Neighbourhood Plan, Policy GD8, the North Wessex Down AONB 5-year management plan, Policy TLA05, and the application supports the objective of the current local plan, SS6, EP4 and EP5.
Okay, thank you. You're just out of time. Councillors, do you have any questions for Mr. Clements? Councillor Court?
Thank you, Chair. Good evening.
Good evening.
Do you have, or have you had any report done on the state of the existing structure which supports what you say?
Yes, councillor, and I think the officers will be able to confirm there's a detailed structural report describing the adequacy of the existing structure for conversion, which, as you'll be aware, is a standard requirement for converting a barn.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Okay, thank you very much for your contribution.
Thank you, Chair.
Questions for officers? I see no hands raised. Oh, Councillor Hussey.
In the summary on page 160, para 1.1, it ends up, would require substantial rebuilding. Can the officers explain the difference between that statement and the structural survey that's been referred to by the agent?
So the submitted structural survey confirms that this is in paragraph 8.11 on page 168 of the agenda. So it says that the submitted structural survey confirms that the existing purlins would need to be replaced and timber beams doubled up. The structure would also require replacement roof and floor. The existing wall cladding would be retained with openings infilled with similar shiplap boarding with an insulated timber frame inner lining. The raised ground to the rear of the structure would also need to be removed and a retaining wall inserted. Considering the amount of works needed, it is the officer's opinion that the conversion of the building is considered to be substantial. Obviously, this test is different to the Class Q test referred to. This is a full application, not agricultural to residential conversion, and this is for a holiday let, not a dwelling. Thank you.
Any further questions? Councillor Howard-Sorrell?
Thank you, Chair. Is substantial a purely subjective term in this case then? Is it just our judgment call? Or is there anything in the MPPF or anything else that would specifically dictate that we have to take it as substantial?
Yeah, it is the decision maker's judgment.
Any further questions? Debate? Anyone wish to open proceedings? Councillor Howard-Sorrell?
Thank you, Chair. This seems quite substantial to me. I think I'm in agreement with the officers. I'd like to hear if anybody else has any opinions to the contrary, but it does seem quite substantial to make this livable, so I think that makes the decision for us.
Are you moving the recommendation?
Unless anybody else wants to move it, I will happily do so.
Okay, do I have a seconder? Councillor Courts? Okay, so move recommendation for refusal, duly seconded. We'll have a show of hands then. Those in favour, please show. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9, okay. Those against? 1. And abstentions? 1. Okay, thank you very much. Can we have the decision, please?
Thank you, Chair, and that application is refused as per the officer's agenda. Thank you.
Okay, application item number 6, Overton CFE Primary School. Sue, if you could introduce, please.
Thank you, Chair. This is an application for the siting of a single-storey building comprising 2 nursery classrooms, a teacher training room, breakout space and ancillary accommodation. The creation of a new, an enlargement of an existing access, car parking, hard standing, a play area and a canopy. If I can refer you to the update paper and the viewing report, there's some additional comments from the County Highways Officer in relation to the traffic that's generated by the proposal, and then 3 further letters of objection which were reiterating previous comments that have already been reported in the officer's report, and then some additional comments. The officer's recommendation is for approval.
Thank you very much. And we have Richard Oram here from Overton Parish Council. Welcome to Development Control. And when you're ready, you've got 4 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm not anticipating testing your timekeeping. In addition to the objections that the Parish Council have already lodged with the application, Overton Parish Council is very concerned about pedestrian safety outside of Overton Primary School should this application be approved. On the morning of the 10th of June 2024, Monday just passed, between 8:05 and 8:45, Overton Parish Council conducted a survey of the numbers of pedestrians crossing what will be the new access road. There were 634 pedestrians passed either through the gateway or across the gateway in that 40-minute period. In the experience of local residents, the current traffic and pedestrian management seems to be chaotic rather than risk assessed and managed. Many near misses have been reported, and with a major change to the current method of access by car and on foot, it's vital that there should be a scheme in place to avoid the situation where a child or adult is seriously injured or worse. We note that in the conditions of approval from Basingstoke and Deane Borough Council, point 9 makes reference to a scheme detailing the means of vehicular access to the site and associated highway works. There's no condition, unfortunately, relating to pedestrian safety. We think this is an oversight and of paramount importance. Now, while the school is responsible for its own site safety, it must also take some responsibility for the traffic it generates. It is essential that all risks are assessed and reduced to an acceptable level prior to any changes being made. In 2020, the Royal Society for the Prevention of Accidents noted that every month 1,200 children are injured in traffic-related collisions that happen within 500 metres of a school. School leaders must assess the risk from vehicle movements on their premises and manage those risks in line with current workplace transport guidance from the Health and Safety Executive. School leaders should also consider in their risk assessment vehicle movements occurring immediately outside the school premises which may be associated with school activities. We believe this road safety element must be prioritised above all else, and the Parish Council therefore continues to object to this application and ask that it be refused. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Mr. Oram, Councillor Oram? Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Chairman. Have there been any recorded accidents, incidents, injuries, or anything in that sort of realm outside the school in the recent past, let's say the last 18 months?
Not recorded formally. However, I would just like to say that we're very glad there haven't been, and we'd like to continue with that.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Don't see any. Oh, Councillor Tutt.
Sorry, I piled in there. May I just ask, I didn't see, but how many forms do you have? How many, for your 634 pedestrians going past in 40 minutes, how many forms have you got already going to the school? How many pupils, perhaps?
I've no idea. The headmistress is about to speak to you later. I think she can tell you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any further questions? Thank you very much for your contribution.
You're welcome.
Okay, so we have nobody listed down to speak in objection, but in support we have Fiona Wyeth and Dave Buxton. If you'd like to approach, please. Welcome to Development Control. When you're ready, press the button on your right. You'll have 4 minutes between the two of you. Thanks.
Good evening. My name is Fiona Wyeth and I'm very proud to be the head teacher of Overton Church of England Primary School. Thank you for the opportunity of being able to address the committee. I'm passionate about early years education, having devoted my professional life for the past 38 years to this. Let me start with a quote from a report, Early Education and Childcare, Changes and Challenges for the Future Local Government Association Report, August 2023. High quality early years provision can generate sustained and significant improvements on children's outcomes, reducing disparities in later life. A child's earliest years are their foundation. If they're given them a good start, they have a much better chance of fulfilling their potential as they grow up. By the time disadvantaged young people sit their GCSEs at age 16, they are on average 18.4 months behind their peers, and around 40% of that gap has already emerged by age 5. Preschool has almost as much impact on a child's educational achievement at age 11 as primary school, and the impact is even greater for those who may develop learning difficulties. So, why maintained nursery in Overton? We're seeing significant changes in the demographics of the village. It's growing with new housing, more parents are both working, more single parents. More families are facing challenges with the cost of living crisis, and our children eligible for free school meals has increased from 6.9% in 2019 and is 19% today. The number of children with special educational needs or disabilities has increased from 55 children, 14% in December 2020, to 72 children, 19% today, but with significant changes being seen on entry and reception from 6% in 2019 to nearly 20% today. Our nursery will provide high-quality early years provision and will have a positive impact on children, particularly disadvantaged children, in terms of their immediate development and long-term outcomes. We've read all the objections on the portal, and whilst Hampshire County Council Highways report states they have no concerns about increased traffic or parking, we acknowledge that Court Drove is busy at peak times. We believe that the nursery will generate approximately an additional 36 trips when we are full at 60. Our recent travel survey, conducted by Hampshire County Council in October 2023, with a 42% response rate, showed that already 45% walk or bike or scoot, 17% park and then stride up the hill, and 37% drive to school. We're working with Hampshire's school travel plan to see what else we can do to improve and enhance opportunities for our families to walk or scoot to school. However, we also intend to mitigate the increase in traffic by ensuring that the start times of the nursery are different to school, so both are not accessing the road at the same time. Increased provision at Breakfast Club in our school, which starts at 7:30, will also reduce flow at peak times. We also intend to mitigate safety of pedestrians, children and families by looking to ensure pathways are fenced, gated and rerouted where possible to separate pedestrian and vehicles, providing an increased area off-road as families wait before school opens, and at the detailed design stage will address all the conditions outlaid by Hampshire County Council Highways. So finally, the Local Government Association report in 2023 states that within every local area there should be an expert provider. This provider should support school staff development, provide concerted support to some children and families alongside the local authority, and have intense wraparound support from other services such as speech and language therapists, special educational needs coordinators and family support workers. We believe we can do this with our maintained nursery with charges that our families can afford. Thank you for your consideration and time.
Okay, thank you very much. Do we have any questions for Mrs. Wyeth? Councillor Phillimore.
Thanks for that. Very, very informative. You mentioned early education provision. I don't think that's a planning issue. It's about the buildings. But can you say that is that early education provision currently being provided in Overton Village?
There's a range of providers. We currently take from between 10 and 15 different early years providers, some in Overton, some further afield in Basingstoke and Whitchurch.
Yeah, if you could just put the microphone button. That's it. Thank you. Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I've no issue over anything to do on the education side. I do, though, ask if you've done any of these surveys when it's been pouring with rain, and whether there is an increase in vehicular traffic. Sometimes we've been having periods of 2-3 weeks of rain. We have it this spring anyway, and whether that makes a difference.
Yes, of course the weather has an impact, but the survey that was done in October when it was wet and cold. So I think it's representative that approximately 37% of our families choose to drive to school for all sorts of reasons.
Okay, any further questions, councillors? Okay, Councillor Tuck.
Sorry, just quickly on total pupil numbers. Roughly.
Currently, we have 379 children on roll. That's 303 families. So in our survey, that equates to about 113 cars per day.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm conscious that we need to keep these things within policy. Councillor Hussey. Okay, thank you both very much for your contribution. And Councillor Watts, if you'd like to approach. welcome to DC, and when you're ready, you'll have 4 minutes. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much. And I acknowledge what Mrs. Wythe has said about the need for good education within the village. And I would like to point out that in the village we already have an outstanding early years setting in Overton Preschool Playgroup, and it has an outstanding Ofsted rating. It currently uses a classroom at the school and also is based in the community centre down the village. There is also Montessori that is based in Bury Down. And there is another setting which closed due to there not being enough demand. However, all that said, I strongly object to this application on the grounds of highway safety and parking with landscaping. Excuse me. I would strongly dispute Hampshire County Council's report saying that the increase of 20 to 30 trips is unlikely to result in a severe capacity on street parking issues on the local highway network. There are already significant traffic and parking issues outside the school and in Lordsville Gardens, and I emailed the committee photos to illustrate the issues. And I believe any extra trips would only add to this problem. An email received in November 2023 from Highway stated that they carried out site visits at various times, including peak periods in the past. What are the times they carried out these visits? According to the email, peak PM time they referred to was 5 to 6 in the evening. This is not peak time for this particular highway. The gates open at 8:25 in the morning and again at 3:20, Monday to Thursday, and 1:20 on a Friday. Living in Lordsville Gardens, I am very well aware of the issues for pedestrians, car drivers, local residents. The journey for pedestrians to school does not feel safe. The plan raises concerns for me as it proposes a second vehicle entrance. This would mean that children walking to school on a footpath would constantly be crossing that access if they want to gain access at the top. This has a potential for significant risk and it also for congestion, while parents who want to drop off at the top entrance turning circle must wait to continue their journey. I believe the school should revisit this plan with attention paid to where should the access to the school be. Having 2 points of entry will only cause more difficulties, not less. Should there just be one with sufficient space for parents, both pedestrian and vehicles, to drop off safely? Landscaping and trees must also be considered. The tree service comments, 25th of April 2024, raised concerns about the proximity of buildings to the trees, stating the placement of the building close to the existing group of trees was somewhat naive. As trees grow, their branches inevitably impact the fabric of the building, and while the branches can be pruned back, the trees will continue to grow and get taller. While the school was likely to respond that they would carry out appropriate management of trees, it would be concerning if they would eventually cut down the trees that are considered too close to the building. Overton is growing, with the development of various sites in recent years and also the proposed development of Portals Mill for residential in the local plan. While we would all like to be able to stop building more houses, we must plan for our infrastructure accordingly, and this applies to education. And we would want to ensure that we have sufficient school places to allow children to attend their local school. I strongly object to this application as it currently stands based on highway safety and parking, and question whether enough thought has been given to the needs of the community and also access to school in the future. I think any new building on the school premises should be future-proofed. We should be planning now to alleviate problems encountered by parents bringing their children to school and local residents in respect of traffic and safety. I would argue that the school must consider its core customer group of reception through to Year 6. There should be a proper and detailed survey of the access to the school along Court Drove and number of vehicles now driving up to the school, beginning and the end of the day, with parking issues in the surrounding residential areas. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Councillors, do we have any questions for Councillor Watts? I see no hands. Okay, thank you very much for your contribution. Questions for officers? Councillor Phillimore.
I'm certainly not questioning the school because it educated me. I'd like to refer officers. Might not be a question, but I need clarification.
It doesn't need to be a question.
All right then. I'm confused and I find the statement on highways confusing and contradictory, and I'd like some clarification in terms of where we're going, because in our integrated impact assessment from our local plan Reg 18 draft report, which is a public document, there's a site OV002 in Court Road, which is the same highway, and for 30 dwellings. And I quote, "A site promoted for development through the Sheila was not proposed for allocation due to the site constraints, in particular heritage landscape, settlement character, coalescence, and specifically local highway impact."
So is there a question to that?
Is there an answer to that? The question is that a fact? That have we not promoted one site and we're asking for another to be approved?
Chair, I think the main answer is it's a different use. That's a different proposal. It's the same context. The constraints of Court Drove, I think, are noted in the report. The use that's before you in this application is this use. It can't be then compared to other work that's being done at a plan preparation stage. That's not a firm proposal which has been looked at in the level of detail that the planning application has. So I would suggest that's not part of your consideration for this evening.
A dangerous assumption is it's the same movement of vehicles.
Well, I think it's the same location in terms of Court Drove, obviously, but it's a different site. Obviously, this is the school site, and it would have a different traffic generation as a consequence. I don't know what assumptions have gone into that particular piece of work, which is why you have to consider this application only in relation to the proposal before you.
Councillor Court.
Thank you, Chair. In the planning balance and conclusion, the last paragraph, it says it is considered that the provision of the new facility will offset the loss of the existing preschool facility. So is that preschool facility to be demolished, or what is happening to it?
The existing building that's leased by the school to the current preschool will be reused by the school for another alternative. I think you should have possibly asked that question of the headmistress, who will know that more than me. But the school will be using that building. It's not to be demolished.
Thank you. It's actually in your report, which is why I asked the officers. Thank you.
Can you switch the mic off, please, Councillor Court? Any further questions? Councillor Tuck.
Hi, I think the highways report hasn't quite taken me with them. On what basis has the metric that 60 pupil spaces generate 20 to 30 extra trips at AM and PM peak been calculated? Well, it was one angle, please.
I mean, it's an estimation based on the increase in pupils, the floor area, and I think county will base it on other sites elsewhere in terms of trip generation. So that's their estimate for this size of development, 20 to 30 additional trips, in addition to what's already happening at the moment. And that's including the traffic that already goes because of the nursery that's there at the moment.
Okay, no further questions. Councillor Hutton.
Just want reassurance that on page 192, which is talking about existing play schools and about the demand and whether the marketing factors that it can't sustain two well-attended preschools is not relevant in judging this planning application. Consideration.
The fact that there's other nurseries in Overton and this might be competing with them isn't a planning consideration.
Councillor Tuck.
On page 201, where you're considering the transport, including parking, how is the safety aspect of students and parents queuing along the existing pavement being resolved where the new car park entrance is proposed, please?
Is that parents and children in terms of pedestrians?
Yeah.
I mean, it's an existing access that's there. It's been on the photos already, so that access could be opened at any time, and there's children and parents are still using that crossing. There's no details shown on the access plans that have been proposed, and county are not requesting it for anything additional to what's shown at the moment. So it's just a normal pedestrian crossing across an access point.
So if I'm reading it correctly, and I may not, at the moment it looked as though it was gated for most of the time, as far as I could tell, and that I presume it's being widened to make it two-way traffic and with visibility displays, got that. But you're still going to have the older children queuing, presumably, and parents walking to and fro. I think it seems quite a high ratio of people that are apparently walking to school. 37% by vehicles only seemed, I felt was low, but I
think we're starting to stray into debate here.
Sorry.
I'm quite happy to throw it open to debate at this point. Would you like to continue as part of the debate?
Well, it's really about the fact that if you're widening that I get it's an existing access point, but you're widening it, and yet you've already got a pedestrian challenge from a safety perspective at that location, and I couldn't see anything that mitigated that or was going to help in any way from a safety angle.
Okay, duly noted. Now the floor's open for debate. Have we got anyone else wanting to speak? Councillor Phillimore?
Well, for debate purposes, what we're talking about here is safety of children. It might be a planning consideration, it might not. What we're talking about here is safety of children. We're increasing the number of younger children that are going to that school, which will need more transport. So I don't concur with some of these traffic movement issues. And been on the council long enough to have received petitions from schools about traffic outside existing schools before we go anywhere else. So, I mean, I'm really worried about the safety of children when this is involved.
Okay, so we've had points made so far. Do we have Councillor Miller, I think, first, and then Councillor Hussey, and then Councillor Miller, then Councillor Freeman. Councillor Hussey. Switch your mic on, please.
3 points I want to address, based on comments made already. Biodiversity, the report very clearly states that on reflection, biodiversity is no objection following receipt of further information subject to conditions. I'm reassured by that. We can't just dismiss the Hampshire County Council report. I understand being concerned about safety of children, but when it says the proposed level of visibility displays are likely to be in excess of what is required and therefore considered to be acceptable, when you have assurances like that and the head's assertion that there'll be staggered start times so that the additional traffic does not coincide with the peak times of other traffic. And I understand the competition, but competition is good, and it's not a planning concern. So I am in favour of the report and will move.
Okay, thank you. So we have a mover for the recommendation. Councillor Miller, you were next, I think.
Thank you, Chair, and I'm not seconding it. The one thing that I think is missing from all this is a proper plan for getting the children into this school. This is not the first time we've gone to this particular site, and at many occasions we've gone up there. It's been absolutely rammed with traffic, and the timings have been variable depending on when it appeared on the viewing panel. But I would have thought that a proper constructed management plan, and I do know they have them for schools because I've been a governor of a school for about 7 or 8 years here in Basingstoke, and there are travel plans for getting children to and from, but it's missing here. and we're having arguments and we're hearing, oh yes, I'm going to stagger the times. Yes, I'm going to do this. That's not a plan. That's an intention. That's what they want to do in the future. Without that, bearing in mind this site has been, we've heard from the ward councillor of how congested this site gets. I'm not happy to support this in this particular form. If there was a proper plan in place that could be implemented by the school, then I'd be a lot more confident. But I go along with the comment from the other ward councillor when he says the safety of children is here, and I get very nervous about theoretical numbers, about generating this, generating that, when we are familiar with the site. And I err on the side of prudence in this, and I cannot support this application.
Okay, so we have a mover but no seconder for the recommendation. Do we have anyone wishing to? Oh, Councillor Jones. Okay, I'll let you speak, but we do need to. Yeah, Karen. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm basically the original design of the footpath and roads around this mean that there is a single direction loop. And in fact, the children are walking up a footpath that is separate from that road system. And that's perfectly safe. By opening up this second access, you have children with traffic crossing across that footpath. And even within the new parking area, you have cars moving and the children, I'm assuming, will go to the new block. Will they go directly through here? Or how will they actually enter the school? So I think we do indeed need a proper plan of the way pupils will enter this thing. And certainly as from what we've seen from our visit, this would not be safe as it stands.
Okay, we have a mover. Do we have a seconder for the motion on the table? Councillor Howard-Sorrell? Okay, so we have the recommendation moved and seconded. We shall move to vote. Those in favour of the recommendation, please show. Oh, that's 3, okay. And those against? Okay, that falls. Okay, so Councillor Miller, I've been asked, given it's been raised tonight that there isn't a plan and you would like to see a plan, would you like to move deferral pending viewing of the plan? You do.
I was about to call your attention to do exactly that, Chair, that I move that this application is deferred for the production of a proper traffic management plan for the movement of children to and from the school. Bearing in mind, we assume that this is implemented, but it must be associated with this application.
Okay, do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Court, I think your hand was first. There's quite a rush of hands there. Okay, so have moved for deferral. Those in favour, please show. I think that's, well, I'll go for that as well then in that case. Right, that's carried then. Yeah, if we could have the decision recorded, please.
Thank you, Chair, that the application be deferred to allow for us to secure a plan, a traffic management plan and movement of children through the site.
Right.
I think we would seek to consult, on receipt of it, we would seek to consult Hampshire County Council and then only return it back to committee with that.
Can I also remind councillors that as it's webcast, can you please use the mics, otherwise it's not recorded. Okay, item number 7, the Coach House, Andover Road, Highclere. Sue, if you'd like to introduce this one, please.
Thank you, Chair. This is an application for a two-storey side extension and provision of a new access. There is no update and the officer's recommendation is for refusal.
Okay, thank you very much. Do we have Bridget Taylor speaking in support? Welcome to Development Control. If you'd like to approach, and when you're ready, you've got 4 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Bridget Taylor. I'm speaking on behalf of the applicant. So, as you'll be aware, members are required to determine this application in accordance with the development plan. And unfortunately, the report that you have before you this evening fails to either identify or assess the relevant development plan policy for extensions in the countryside. So there is a thorough assessment of the supplementary planning guidance for subservient extensions and so on, but nowhere in the report will you see a reference to policy SS6, which has a specific provision regarding extensions in areas outside settlement boundaries, such as this. So policy SS6D tells you that extensions to homes in the countryside are permitted where the size of the proposal would be appropriate to the plot and it would not be significantly visually intrusive in the landscape. So those two questions, plot size and visual impact. So looking first at the plot size, there's a previous approval on this site granted in 2018 for a double-storey extension. So without wanting to bombard you with the numbers here, this proposal that you're looking at tonight would take the footprint of the dwelling up to 18% of the plot, and the previous approval was 17.7%. Sorry, to be more precise, 18.6 versus 17.7. So in terms of plot size, the council's previously accepted that something broadly similar to this is acceptable. Turning to the second question, which is would it be significantly visually intrusive in the landscape? Now, hopefully members have had a chance to visit the site themselves. It's a slightly unusual one in terms of the positioning of the building on the plot. It's clear that had the officer undertaken an assessment of policy SS6, they would have concluded it was not visually intrusive. At paragraph 8.9 of the report, the officer concludes that the site is well contained, limited views, acceptable in terms of the landscape, basically no breach of landscape policy. So when you look at those 2 points, it's clear that the principle of development is essentially acceptable. That focuses your mind, therefore, on the question of whether the extension is or is not subordinate enough to the primary dwelling. Now, this comes not from development plan policy, this comes from supplementary design guidance, and it doesn't say that every single extension needs to be subordinate in all cases. It says they usually should be. So what I'm saying to you is this is a slightly unusual site. The house is positioned perpendicular to the road, so it's not entirely easy to see from the plans, but in plan form it looks like a reasonably large extension, but it's replacing a garage that's there now and connecting in to provide an L shape. There are a number of other examples, some very close by, where an increase in floor space of a similar proportion has been allowed. I can give you some examples if you like, but this proposal is a 47% increase compared to the current dwelling and garage in total floor space. There's an example at Westridge Oaks on Star Lane, where the council was happy to approve a 43% increase under delegated powers just at the end of last year. Many examples in Wilton Hill, as I'm sure you're aware, where there's been bungalows, had extra stories added and extensions to the sides. So in summary, I would just like to urge members to just pull back and look at that policy, SS6. It's about the plot size and it's about the visual intrusion into the landscape. Those are the key considerations here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillors, do we have any questions for Ms Taylor? Councillor Miller.
Just a quick one, Chair, thank you. Can you run by that percentage increase on the plot size again? I ran out of...
Sure. Sorry, I didn't want to bombard you with numbers.
The increase that this extension would create? That's
So the
number.
total floor space or the footprint of the dwelling?
Footprint.
The footprint, this would be 18%, 18.6% of the plot with the extension.
Of the whole plot?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Chair.
It's a 995 square metre plot, so quite sizable.
Thank you. Okay, any further questions? Okay, thank you very much for your contribution. Questions for officers? Councillor Miller? A question for officers. The points that were made by our speaker on behalf of the applicant, were they valid?
We've assessed the proposals against policy EM10 and the supplementary design guidance. EM10 in terms of the and the supplementary design guidance, really we're looking at the scale, bulk and design of the extension in comparison to the existing property. It's not considered to be subservient because of the size of it, and you can see that from the plans that are in the paper as well.
Thank you. Any other questions for officers, councillors? Okay, debate. Do we have anyone prepared to move? Stony silence. Councillor Freeman?
I'm happy to move the officer's recommendation.
Okay, thank you very much. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Court? Okay, motion on the table, move the recommendation, duly seconded. We'll have a show of hands. Those in favour, please show. Okay. Those against? Any abstentions? One. Okay, if we could have the decision, please.
Thank you, Chair, that the application be refused for the reasons on the update on the main officer's report.
Okay, which brings us on to planning application item number 8, stables adjacent to Croft Bank at Ball Hill. If we could have Bethan, if you could introduce, please. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. This is a full planning application for the demolition of an existing stable building and erection of 4 dwellings together with access and landscaping. In terms of an update, the agent has confirmed that plot 4 is custom built. However, the design of the other plots have been based around that custom design. 2 further objections were received, mainly covering points that were already raised. However, 2 errors were noted in the report which have been clarified on the update paper. It was also confirmed in the update that the Andwell appeal referenced at paragraph 8.15 on page 235 of the agenda. Whilst that was a dismissed appeal, what it does confirm is that the land within the curtilage of stables can be considered previously developed land. It was further clarified that the developable area of previously developed land is up to the decision maker based on a number of factors, and clarification that the existing site has a lawful equestrian use. The application is recommended for approval, subject to conditions listed on pages 249 to 254 of the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bridget, if you'd like to approach again. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I'd like to thank your officers for bringing this application to committee with a positive recommendation and for the effort that's gone into the report. So, as you've been told, this is an application for 1 custom-built dwelling and 3 market dwellings. It's an application we're really proud of. It demonstrates to me good planning, where we've started with an identified need. This is the owner of Croft Bank has got a need for a particular form of house and has entered discussions with the developer to try to bring forward a home that suits his needs. We've then engaged with the parish council, and that resulted in significant changes to what we eventually brought forward in the planning application. So we did start out thinking whether the site could take 6, and that came back to 4, much smaller dwellings, much more landscaping, much more biodiversity improvement. So I think that's reflected in the response we've had through the course of the application, which I'll come to briefly, but we've got an officer recommending approval, we've got a parish council also in support, and a number of other officers. So just to briefly trot through, so the officers recommended approval and is satisfied that this is policy compliant. The parish council have supported the application. They've considered it to be well presented. They support that the hedgerow has been retained. They consider the proposed design and materials to be in keeping with local styles. They support the inclusion of bungalows and smaller dwellings because these address an identified need in the neighbourhood plan, and they consider the layout to be respectful and to deliver a discrete development. There's no objection from the AUMB officer or the council's landscape officer, no objection from the highways team, no objection from environmental health or the waste team or biodiversity. So just picking up on a few sort of the key considerations in the report, really. So in terms of biodiversity, this is delivering an 80% net gain in biodiversity. So what we've got here is a 5-metre wide wildlife corridor around the perimeter of the site. We've got an extra area of woodland, a sliver of woodland around the bottom of the site, and we've got additional landscaping and hedgerow between each of the plots. So 80%, I hope you'll join me in saying, is a good outcome. The principle of development, as you've heard, is compliant with your development plan. This is an equestrian site, a lawful equestrian site, and it is previously developed land, which is compliant with policy SS6A. Alternatively, it's actually also compliant in terms of there being a local need because you've got a policy supporting the delivery of smaller dwellings in this particular neighbourhood area. There's a landscape LVIA has been produced confirming there's no significant landscape effects. The highways department are happy that the site access has a suitable visibility. There's sufficient parking in accordance with standards. Electric vehicle charging facilities are provided, and there'll be no material impact on the highway network. And ultimately, this will deliver two two-storey houses and 2 bungalows, all of which are 3 bedrooms. So they're at the smaller end of what you would normally see on a site like this. I think you'll agree. So
1 minute left.
That's really everything that I wanted to cover.
Thank you very much. Councillors, do you have any questions for Ms Taylor? Oh, I don't see any hands raised. Thank you very much for your contribution. So, no one else lined up to speak. Do we have any questions for officers? Councillor Court.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just looking at the summary. It actually talks about previous developed land or PDL. Is equestrian ground actually PDL?
Yes, it is. Yes, the MPPF definition includes that, and the curtilage of, any stable buildings, so land associated with the stables.
Thank you, Chair.
Any more questions, anybody? Okay. Debate. Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Chair. I like this application. It's in the right place and it's got the right form of housing. I'm delighted to hear that they've got 2 bungalows. We don't have enough. Well, I'm going to say less. It's not English, but no, we don't have enough bungalows in the area, even up at East Woodey. There's a lot of big houses up in East Woodey, and I think they pitched this exactly right. And delighted to see it before us tonight, and I would like to move the officer's recommendation for approval.
Thank you very much. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Gaskell. Okay. Live proposal on table. All those in favour of the recommendation, please show. I think that's unanimous. Okay, if we could have the decision, please.
Thank you, and that application is approved as per the agenda. Thank you.
Oh, Councillor Tuck.
Thanks, Chair. I noticed there are some, I think, conditions associated with approval. Is that right? Have I read that correctly?
Yes, they yeah, as I said, they were on pages 254 to 249 to 254.
Can I just ask you, I was really impressed as my fellow councillor with the mix of development here. Is there anything in that? I don't know if point 19 was with the Article 3, I'm not quite sure what it is, but is there any way that we can ensure the bungalows remain bungalows and are not hopped extra stories on in due course?
No, you can't bind future.
Yeah, condition 19, let me just get it up, sorry. Condition 19 removes permitted development rights, so any application coming forward would need to be considered.
Thank you.
Okay, so that brings us on to item number 9, last but by no means least. Hatchwarren Retail Park. Sue, if you'd like to introduce, please.
Thank you, Chair. This is an application at Unit 4 in Hatchwarren Retail Park, and it's alterations to a shop front, minor relocation of the entrance, some alteration to the cladding, installation of 2 new access points to the rear, and some HVAC equipment. Just to bear in mind, the site already has planning permission for change of use to a hot food takeaway, with no restrictions in terms of opening hours. There were some barriers approved in 2003, and again, no conditions were imposed at that time as to when the barriers should be locked. And the original consent for that whole retail park there has no hours restrictions. The concerns raised by some residents in terms of the use of the car park late at night is something for the management of the retail park and is not for consideration as part of a shop front application this evening. The officer's recommendation is for approval.
Okay, thank you very much. So in terms of who we've got down, we've got Richie Wickham and Councillor Reid. So I can only see you, Councillor Reid. So if you'd like to approach, thank you for your patience. And I'm sure you know the drill. So when you're ready, you'll have 4 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a very interesting situation. I think that the process that's been followed is very unfair to the constituents that I represent. When the permission was given for the change of use, there was no specification as to which operator would go in there. So it could have been a shop with a cafe in it, like Dunelm. It could have been Auntie Jane's tea shop, probably arousing no oppositions, or it could have been a fast food outlet, and that's what it turned out to be. But at no point back in January did this committee discuss the fast food outlet option, which does carry implications with it. And there lies the problem. So we had a generic permission to change the use with no mention of which operator would go in there. And we now know that it is McDonald's, and I've got nothing against McDonald's as an operator, but we do know from past experience of all fast food outlets that they carry implications with them. Now, the site has been a very difficult one, and I think we've got a good indication with that drawing. The car park is effectively divided into 2 parts, the bit in front of Lidl and the bit in front of this store. The bit in front of Lidl has been misused by car meets. So we've had donutting and drifting and very dangerous activities going on. So I was instrumental in talking to the management company and getting the gates locked at 10:30 at night, half an hour after the last shop shuts. So that was a big step forward, and we haven't had a car meet there before. But it is the nature of fast food outlets that they stay open late and compromise that security that has been introduced. And I see nothing in the paper to say that this problem has been discussed or addressed by the officers in bringing forward this paper. I think it might be a very good idea to defer this decision so that these issues can be addressed. Because I would suggest that the sensible thing, if we're going to go ahead for the first time, knowing who the operators are, to say, okay, there's some extra conditions. We want some more barriers paid for by this development so that the area in front of Lidl is now blocked off. So new barriers to stop people getting in there and misusing it as they did before. Or we want to know what the opening hours are going to be before we give this permission, because it is putting things absolutely round backwards if the decision that is made on something which is actually quite innocuous tonight, but the principle is being made tonight as to which operator goes in there. You've not had an opportunity to make a decision in principle before. This is the first time that the operator has been mentioned, and unless the Development Control Committee is seen to be considering that, then the voices of the people of Hatch, Warren and Beggarwood are not being heard. So I really would recommend that is considered, Chairman, perhaps a deferral or perhaps a rejection, but we've got to give this a lot more thought before we can go ahead safely. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Do we have any councillor questions? Councillor Court.
Good evening. You mentioned the word implications. You've just mentioned one so far. You also mentioned McDonald's. I'm presuming if another operator came in who wanted to stay open until 11:30, that wouldn't present a problem, or would it? Question mark.
I think the principle of any operator going up to 11:30, I've got nothing against McDonald's, Burger King, Kentucky Fried Chicken, and at this point, Chairman, I run out of knowledge as to the names of different outlets, but any outlet that opens up to 11:30 perhaps might then cause the security issues that we had before and give rise to conditions where we need extra barriers to close off the vulnerable part of the car park, or we need some sleeping policemen in there to stop it being misused. We need, as a borough council, and I'm a county councillor, but I think the borough council is best placed here to make some informed decisions to protect the interests of the residents who live nearby.
Thank you. Okay. Any more councillor questions? See no hands raised. Thank you very much for your contribution, Councillor Reid. So, questions for officers at this point. Do we have any? Councillor Tuck.
I was very interested to look for the noise impact assessment and the odour impact assessments, but I couldn't locate those on the website. So all I have is the assessment, whereas I'd like to have got back to the original data, because I think odour impact in particular, when you're so near to dwellings, is significant, especially as we don't know the hours of operation for this establishment.
Was there a question in that?
Yeah, can we see them, please?
They're part of the file. I mean, the officer, the environmental health officer has commented on them. They're part of the file. They were a requirement of the change of use application that details were to be submitted, so they've submitted it as part of this application. They've submitted details in terms of noise and odour, and that's dealt with on page 272 of the officer's report. And the environmental health officer is happy with the information that's been submitted.
So I feel at this point, for the benefit of members, some of you will have been at more DCs than others. Basically, the application 230229/4 is for a change of use from Class A retail to Class A retail and or mixed restaurant hot food takeaway use. So at that point, things like smells, noise, other kind of ASB type issues would have been brought into consideration, and that was granted under deferred powers. So if it was the actual operating company is irrelevant, be it McDonald's, Burger King, Wendy's, KFC, kebab shop, whatever. It's the fact that you might have people congregating late at night and generating noise, etc., etc. But that's already been considered, so that's not in front of us tonight on these papers. Councillor Miller, yes, you had your hand.
I'm going to take you back to what you just said, Chair. Thank you. It does make a difference who goes in there. I think the county councillor made the point, because the one thing that we are not is not visible here, and it's a bit close to home for my own ward, because we just had a McDonald's opened, is the hours of opening. Now, little Mrs. Mary's tea shop is not going to be open 24 hours. McDonald's is a big difference, and it's are we assuming that the change of use automatically said 24-hour operation? Because it does depend on what goes into these classes of what businesses go in there. I think this point was well made. What I'm asking for is, what are the hours of operation of this particular business? And it's mentioned as a McDonald's. Let's take it up as McDonald's.
Okay, so we'll ask that question on hours of operation, but I need to reiterate, the choice of company is not material. It is simply the type of operation.
The previous change of use has no hours restrictions, so anyone can occupy it as a hot food takeaway regardless of who the end user is, and there are no hours restrictions. All that is before you tonight is an application for a shop front and some units round the back and some additional pedestrian doors into for workers. To then try and control hours of use and anything else through a shop front application would be wholly unreasonable.
Okay. I did not ask to question hours of operation, Chair. I just said, I think I've had the answer to my question, in fact, from Sue, is that, are you saying that the change of use opens up a 24-hour operation? That's, I
There
think.
are no hours restrictions on it, it's unrestricted. As are all of the other retail units that are there. There are no hours restrictions on any of those, albeit that those may not be as a hot food takeaway.
And I beg to question the officers here. They opened the door to McDonald's by mentioning it in the report.
Yeah, just to clarify that, Councillor Miller, the reason McDonald's are referenced is simply they're the applicant. So on all application reports you see, we reference them. We're not putting any weight on them. We've not put anything in there to suggest that it's relevant to the material considerations or the assessment. It's just simply a statement of fact that it is McDonald's. In terms of planning applications, even if it was another operator, the only thing that you're considering is the physical works in the application, i.e., in theory, another operator could come in. Highly unlikely because it's obviously based on brand, etc. But the applicant isn't relevant to our consideration, your consideration of the application.
Councillor Freeman, you had your hand raised.
Thank you, Chair. While I understand there are concerns about it being McDonald's and the operating hours, as Sue and other officers have said, this is purely to determine whether they are allowed to alter the shop front and change a few minor bits and pieces. We cannot contest opening hours, and as said right at the start of this this particular planning application, that's not something we can consider here. We're just here to consider the shop front, and as such, I don't see any problems with it, and I'd like to move the officer's recommendation.
Okay, thank you. So we have a mover, Councillor Hussey. You had your hand raised.
Yes. Is it feasible at this stage of the application to defer it to go back to McDonald's to see whether they would fund segregation of the two car parks?
No.
Councillor Tuck, you got your hand raised.
You'll have to explain it to me a little bit more. 8.10, we are considering noise and odour, and the alterations to the building are required in order to support the approved change of use of the site. So I do think that noise and odour are a fundamental part of this application. If you didn't need the extra kit, then you wouldn't have put it in this document. And I've not seen those two reports. And I actually consider odour and noise nuisance overnight to be a really big issue in a residential area.
Councillor Howard-Sewell.
I've just said I'll second the motion on the table.
Okay, so we have a live motion moved and seconded. So we'll move to vote. Show of hands. Those in favour of the recommendation, please show. That's 8. Okay. Those against, please show. 1, 2, 3. Any abstentions? Okay, that's carried. If we could have the decision, please.
Thank you, Chair, that the application be approved subject to the conditions in the officer's report.
Okay, thank you everyone. So we have one last item of business, which is agenda item 7, quarterly repeals report.
Thank you, Chair. This is the quarterly appeals report covering the period of February through to April 24. It's set out in the normal way. I just draw members' attention to the Appendix A in particular, the Inhurst Cottages decision. This was an application for 14 dwellings. It was recommended for refusal by officers, came to committee and was refused. It was dismissed at appeal. It's important for a number of reasons. Firstly, it's a major application. As discussed previously, performance in relation to major application appeals is really important. So the fact that it was dismissed, i.e. the council won, the appeal is really important. But in particular, there have been a number of applications come to committee regarding the off-site nuclear impacts in relation to the DEPZ related to AWE. This appeal is another decision which supports the position taken by this council in refusing applications for new residential dwellings in the DEPZ. In this instance, the 14 being not being possible to accommodate in the off-site emergency plan. And I know that in that particular appeal, members of the West Berkshire Council, along with the ONR, also contributed to the appeal to make those points about the potential impact on the off-site plan. So it's just another reiteration of that as a consistent message from inspectors. Beyond that, Appendix B sets out just a summary of all other appeal decisions, the majority of which were dismissed, but are there for members to note.
Okay, and I'll invite any comments if anyone has any or questions at this point. I guess we note the report. You're all happy to note the report? Okay, nodding heads in approval. Okay, I think that's it for tonight. Meeting closed at 20:42. Thanks everyone for your attendance.